The crowd gasped. My heel twisted on the stage's edge, my back lurched, and I hit the floor with a thud that echoed louder than the DJ's bass. Glasses clinked. Someone dropped a fork. My cheek stung from the carpet burn, and my elbows scraped along the wooden step. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us what would you do in this situation? Be honest, tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. I heard my father's voice echo through the gold-lit ballroom. You're an embarrassment to this family, Madison. Get off the stage. Laughter. At first, awkward chuckles. Then, full-throated laughs. From guests in suits and glittering gowns. From my brother's college friends. Even from people I didn't know, people who'd probably never worked a day in their life. The pain in my body was nothing compared to the heat crawling up my neck. I looked up and met my father's eyes, Thomas Wren, the great real estate tycoon of Cincinnati. Silver-haired, suit perfectly tailored, still holding his champagne flute like this was just another day in paradise. I whispered, because I wouldn't sell my apartment? It's a shoebox, Maddie. You'd rather keep your independence than give your brother a proper start to his marriage? Shameful. My heart thudded in my ears. I stood, brushing off my dress. My brother, Chase, didn't even look at me. He stood with his new wife, Sienna, dolled up in a custom white gown that probably cost more than my car. Her smile never faltered. Neither did his. And then my mother, Dana, leaned into the mic and said with a syrupy voice, "Let's get back to the speeches, shall we?" As if I hadn't just been shoved like trash in front of 200 guests. As if I didn't exist. I stepped down from the stage with a calm face and fire in my chest. They didn't know. Not a single one of them knew the truth about this place, this lavish, grand, chandelier-drenched venue they were all standing in. The place where champagne flowed like water and the chandeliers cost 6 figures each. They were laughing inside my building. And I was done being quiet. I didn't leave the hall. I walked straight to the back where the venue manager stood, Carla. She looked up from her tablet, her eyes wide. "Miss Wren? Are you?" I raised a finger. "Bring me the mic. Now." People were halfway through their lobster risotto when Carla walked onto the stage and handed me the wireless mic. I stepped into the spotlight, standing exactly where I had fallen minutes earlier. The same people who laughed stared at me with curiosity. Or boredom. I smiled. Some of you might not know me well. I'm Madison Wren, daughter of Thomas and Dana Wren, sister of Chase Wren. Apparently, the embarrassment of the family. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. One old man let out a chuckle and took a sip of a scotch. I turned slightly toward my family's table. I was asked to sell my apartment to fund this wedding. I refused. Not because I don't care, but because I already contributed more than you'll ever know. I paused. Then raised my voice. Because, ladies and gentlemen, this building you're standing in, this venue, this breathtaking hall that's been featured in Cincy Bridal Monthly and Architect Digest. I turned to the crowd. It's mine. I own it. This is my venue. You could hear a fork drop. I looked directly at my father, whose jaw had slackened. And from now on, I'd like you all to please finish your meals quickly. Because as of 10 minutes from now, your free booking is over. Gasps. People looked at each other, confused. My mother stood, her face going red. "You're bluffing," she spat. "You're being dramatic again." I held up a contract from my clutch. This is the rental agreement. Signed not by my father, but by me. And under my company's policies, any event that includes harassment of the venue owner is subject to immediate termination. Security guards stepped in. Calm, professional. "My people." Carla returned to my side. "Should we escort the disruptive guests out, ma'am?" I nodded. My father stood, face pale. "You wouldn't dare." I walked off the stage and stood right in front of him. I just did. The hush that followed was unlike anything I'd ever felt before. Not even the chandeliers dared to tremble. My father's face had lost all color. His lips parted as if to speak, but nothing came out. Dana clutched her designer clutch like it could shield her from humiliation. And Chase? He just stared at me like I'd grown horns. Sienna, bless her perfect lashes, dropped her fork. The guests were now whispering in every corner of the ballroom. The whispers weren't about Chase or his $40,000 tux.
They were about me.
Madison, the invisible daughter. The quiet one. The girl who didn't follow the family line, who'd refused the big corporate position Thomas had dangled like bait years ago. Because I'd wanted something of my own. And I'd built it. Brick by brick. Client by client. While they laughed behind my back.
Now?
They were standing inside it. I took a calm breath. Everyone is free to finish their meals in peace. Those who don't think I'm an embarrassment anyway. A few people actually clapped. I turned and walked toward the side exit, my heels echoing like war drums. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shaking. I felt free.
Alive.
I had exposed them not with cruelty, but with truth. But just as I reached the door, I heard a voice behind me. Madison, wait. It was Uncle Joel, my dad's older brother. A man they'd always called a burnout behind closed doors. But he'd always been kind to me. He caught up to me just outside the ballroom, beneath the marble archway lit in warm amber. That took guts. I swallowed hard. You think I went too far? He chuckled. Madison, they pushed you. Literally. And you didn't scream or throw anything. You reminded them whose name was on the deed. That's not petty. That's power. That was the first time I realized. I wasn't ashamed. They were. By the next morning, the story had spread through our family circles like wildfire. My cousin Olivia called at 6:13 a.m., laughing so hard she could barely breathe. Girl, did you really kick them out of the reception? My mom said Sienna's dad had to pay the vendors himself. Your dad left his Rolex on the table. I smiled but didn't say much. Let them talk. What mattered more? My inbox. Overflowing. Subject. We'd love to feature your venue in our next cover story. Subject. Booking inquiry, saw what happened last night and we're obsessed. Subject. You're the boss now. Can we talk partnerships? Every magazine, every vendor, every local influencer in Cincinnati suddenly knew who I was. Not just Thomas Wren's daughter. I was the woman who built a venue from scratch, hosted the most expensive wedding of the year, and dropped the truth like a mic. By noon, I'd been contacted by 3 news outlets. But not a word from my parents. Until 7:02 p.m. A knock on the glass door of my apartment. I opened it to find
Chase.
Wearing jeans and a hoodie. No wife. No smug smile. He looked different. Can I come in? I hesitated. You didn't stand up for me yesterday. He looked down. I know. I was scared. That made me pause. He stepped inside, silent for a moment. Look, Madison, I'm sorry. What happened was awful. I didn't know Dad was going to do that. I didn't know how deep it all ran. You laughed. I did, he admitted, voice small. But not because I thought it was funny. Because I panicked. I didn't know what to do. For a moment, I saw the scared little brother behind the tailored suits. He continued, Sienna, she told me after we left that she never wants to see my parents again. She saw who they really are. We both did. I guess it took you standing up to them for us to see it. I crossed my arms. So now what? He looked up. I want to start fresh. I want you in my life. And if you're okay with it, I want to invest in your business. I blinked. What? He smiled faintly. Sienna and I talked. We want to put our wedding gift money into your venue expansion. If you'll have us. I said nothing for a moment. Then, slowly, I smiled. 2 days after the wedding debacle, I sat in my office above the ballroom, blinds half drawn, sipping lukewarm coffee and watching sunlight cut across the marble floors of my lobby. My inbox kept pinging, brides, vendors, and curious media people wanting my side of the story. But there was one thing I hadn't seen yet. My father. Not a text. Not an email. Not a word. Until I received a call from my building's front desk. Ms. Wren? There's a Thomas and Dana Wren here to see you. They say it's urgent. My first instinct? Hang up. But then something inside me settled. No shaking. No nerves. Just a quiet calm. Send them up. When they walked into my office, I didn't offer them a seat. My father wore a gray blazer over a cashmere sweater, looking more like a senator than a dad. Dana followed closely behind, her heels clacking with every step, her lips painted in a smile that didn't touch her eyes.
He spoke first. Madison.
We came to talk, not to fight. I leaned back, arms folded.
Funny.
You weren't as diplomatic when you shoved me off a stage. Dana winced, looking away. Dad cleared his throat. I was wrong. About a lot of things. I stared. You humiliated me. You didn't just reject my help, you mocked it. You called me an embarrassment in front of 200 people. He nodded slowly. I know. Silence. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folder. He placed it on my desk. I've transferred 30% of the Wren Group shares to your name. My jaw tightened.
Why?
Because, he said slowly, it took what happened at that wedding for me to realize I've been blind. You didn't just build something, Maddie. You outgrew us. You surpassed us. Dana spoke for the first time, voice softer than I'd ever heard. We were wrong, Madison. About everything. We thought if you didn't do it our way, it wasn't the right way. But you proved us wrong. They looked tired. Not just physically, but emotionally stripped. And for once, they weren't looking down at me. They were looking up. I didn't take the shares. Not that day. Instead, I said, I don't want a piece of the family empire out of guilt. If I'm going to take anything from you, it'll be because I deserve it, not because you're trying to wash off your shame. Dad lowered his eyes. Then tell me what we can do. You can apologize publicly. Dana stiffened. What do you mean? I mean, go to every guest from that wedding, every client, every vendor, every one of your little charity friends, and tell them you were wrong. Tell them your daughter isn't an embarrassment. Tell them she owns the venue, and she built it from scratch while you were too busy counting your zeros. He looked like he'd swallowed nails. But he nodded. 3 days later, Thomas and Dana Wren released a statement on their social media platforms and the local business journal.
It read,
At our son's wedding, we said and did things that do not reflect who we want to be as people or as parents. Our daughter, Madison Wren, is a force of nature. She built something extraordinary, and we are proud of her. We failed to see it, but we see it now. To anyone who witnessed what happened, we ask for your understanding, and more importantly, your forgiveness on behalf of a daughter who deserves none of the disrespect she was given. After that, the tide turned even more. My inbox tripled. I got an offer to host a nationally televised wedding show segment in my venue. An upscale chain of hotels offered to buy my concept and brand it nationwide. But I didn't say yes. Not yet. Instead, I spent the following weeks building something better. A second location. With Chase and Sienna as my business partners. Not because of money, but because they believed in me. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was seen. I wasn't just a daughter. I was the one they all stood on. Literally. The foundation beneath their $1 million wedding. And they never even looked down long enough to notice, until I made them. 2 weeks later, the second venue was nearly finalized. Smaller, cozier, tucked into a riverside district in Louisville. I walked through the site with Chase and Sienna, the sun pouring through tall windows as dust hung like gold in the air. This'll be your new crown jewel, Chase said, smiling. I nodded, distracted. Something had been nagging me for days. A strange message from the building's previous owner had landed in my inbox the night before. Check the ledger behind the front wall panel. It belonged to your grandmother. My grandmother? I barely remembered her. She passed when I was 6. My dad rarely spoke of her. But curiosity got the best of me. That night, after the team left, I stayed back and found the loose panel in the foyer wall. Inside was a wooden box. I opened it and found a crumbling leather notebook, its pages filled with drawings, notes, and ownership papers. It wasn't just a coincidence. This venue used to belong to my grandmother. She'd owned it decades ago, run events here before my father moved the family business upscale, and buried the history with it. The next morning, I stood in front of my parents. You knew Grandma ran events in Louisville? Thomas froze. Where did you hear that? I tossed the ledger on the table. From her own hand. Dana's lips parted. That place, it was supposed to be sold. I laughed, bitter.
No.
It was taken. Rewritten in history, like she never mattered. My father looked away. She was the first to build something real. Before either of you. And you erased her. I didn't yell. I didn't fight. Instead, I renamed the venue, Evelyn Hall, after my grandmother. And on opening day, I stood on the small stage, my hand on the same wood beam she once touched, to the women they tried to silence, and the women who refused. 3 months later, Evelyn Hall had a waitlist stretching into next year. Couples from across the state came to tour it, drawn not just by its charm, but by the story. The real story. A granddaughter honoring the legacy of a forgotten matriarch. A woman who stood on her own after being pushed aside. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, I stood on the steps with Chase and Sienna beside me. Carla, my loyal manager from the original venue, smiled from the crowd. And just beyond them, my parents. They didn't say a word, but they were there. And this time they weren't in front. They were in the back row, watching, listening.
And that was enough.
Weeks passed. Business boomed. Then one Sunday morning I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. Old-fashioned. From my father. Maddie. I've spent most of my life trying to mold others into my version of success. I see now that I overlooked what true strength looks like. Not loud. Not boastful. Quiet. Relentless. Like you. Like your grandmother. I'm sorry it took so long for me to see you.
But I do now.
And I'm proud. Dad. I didn't cry. I didn't run to reply. Instead, I tucked the letter into the same wooden box where my grandmother's ledger now lived. It didn't fix everything, but it mattered. Months later, a wedding was held at Evelyn Hall, a small, heartfelt ceremony. The bride wore her grandmother's dress. The groom cried during his vows. Afterward, they pulled me aside. You don't know what your story meant to us, the bride said. I was going to give up on my dream until I read about you. You reminded me that it's okay to stand alone. That was it. That was the moment. Not the public apology. Not the headlines. Not even the growth of the business. But this quiet moment of impact was the real reward. I didn't need revenge. I had something better. Legacy. And that stage, I never stood on it to be seen again. Because now, I owned every room I walked into.